Hello everyone, my name is Elisa Baum and I am Percona's Director of Product Marketing. We'll begin in just a moment, but first I'd like to conduct a bit of house cleaning. Could you please raise your hand using the hand icon located in the GoToWebinar control panel to let me know if you can hear me? Let's see, any hands out there? Can you hear me? Oh, great. Okay, thank you. I see a bunch of hands. Next, during this webinar, you will be on mute. Should you have any questions during the discussion, enter them in the questions field within the GoToWebinar control panel. At the end of the webinar, we will take time to answer as many questions as possible, and those that aren't addressed will be answered in a follow-up blog post on Percona's MySQL performance blog. In addition, a recording of this webinar and the slides will be sent to everybody within 48 hours. With that said, thank you so much for attending today's webinar, Percona Server 5.6 Enterprise Grade MySQL, presented by Stuart Smith, who is Percona's Director of Software Architecture. Stuart, you have the floor.
Thanks, and good afternoon, good morning, good day, wherever people are in the world. It's good morning for me, and good afternoon on the other continent that is the United States. So, welcome all. I'm going to be talking here about Percona Server 5.6. The title is Enterprise Grade MySQL. As you're aware, Enterprise is a wonderful label to attach to software. I like to refer to Percona Server as a MySQL for real production environments is the other way to think about it if you really don't like the term enterprise grade, sorry. But think about it as for real MySQL. Questions are welcome. Elisa will poke me. Feel free to ask at any time. We'll probably try and keep them mostly towards the end and answer as many as possible. If we don't get to the question, I'll write it up and put it on the blog post. I'll write that up as well, also pointing to things like numbers and details of percent. So let's start off with having a look at what is Percona Server. So before we jump into 5.6, which is the latest major release, let's look at what Percona Server is. And there's been three previous releases of Percona Server. There's Percona Server 5.0, 5.1, and 5.5. Percona Server is based on Oracle MySQL. I'm not going to cover all the great new things in Oracle MySQL 5.6 here, or what's been happening in the Oracle MySQL world. That's for another webinar. I'm instead going to talk about Percona Server specific things and how we enhance MySQL. So Percona Server is not a fork, right? We add features, we add bug fixes. We're not differing for the sake of differing. We're a branch or a distribution of it, much like Red Hat is to Linux, Percona Server is to Oracle's MySQL, right? We add things that are needed by our customers and needed to pull a piece of software for when we're helping our customers with their installations. So we're not differing for the sake of differing. We add features and bug fixes, improve performance, that kind of thing. So basically, it's a real simple formula, right? Percona Server is MySQL Community, which is GPL licensed, completely free and open source, including those found only in MySQL Enterprise, which is not open source, ours is. We focus on features needed for production in web and enterprise environments, right? We add bug fixes that affect our customers. So we have customers who may find a bug in MySQL, and we can fix that and get a fix to them in a timely fashion, as well as we have performance enhancements, making things faster for Percona Server, right? So we have performance enhancements that are in Percona Server. So we've always been well known for Percona Server performance, and with Percona Server 5.6, we continue in that tradition of improving performance. For interesting side note, there is about 41, so there's over 40 bug fixes before upstream in Percona Server 5.6. So we've fixed over 40 bugs in Percona Server 5.6 before they were fixed in Oracle MySQL 5.6. And at last count, and this was actually a little while ago now, it's a bit out of date, and I've got a few more, there's about 40 of them that are actually only fixed in Percona Server 5.6 and not MySQL 5.6. So we have a whole bunch of just a simple thing, features, bug fixes, performance improvements. That's what Percona Server is. Percona Server 5 was all about performance and manageability improvements. We really set a standard for MySQL performance and manageability. And by now, Percona Server 5.1 is a very stable and mature database system. It's got excellent throughput, excellent performance, excellent stability, and excellent response time. So I'm not just talking about stability as in I'm also talking about performance stability. That is, you don't suddenly have, if you look at over an hour, average transactions per second could be really quite high. But what will hurt you is if you have, periods of time where there's no transactions going through. So Percona Server is very much about having consistent performance over the entire runtime of the database. We also had a whole bunch of interesting diagnostics to be able to help people to find out what's going on and find out quickly. And so you can find big wins in either tuning your application and how it uses the database server or the database server itself. Find the problems quickly and make improvements. And even when MySQL 5 was released, we ran some performance benchmarks and we're finding Percona Server 5.1 was beating MySQL 5.5. So a common question is, there's usually a bunch of people who are still running MySQL 5.1 or Percona Server 5.1. And a common question is, how long will Oracle support 5.1 for, or how long will Percona support Percona Server 5.1 for? Well, I can't answer for Oracle. I can guess and inform you on that, but I can answer for us. Our answer for any product is as long as there is customer demand, right? 5.1 is stable and mature, and some people are quite happy with that for a long time. And so basically, we'll continue to support it as long as there's customer demand for it. Just like we'll still, support 5.0 if needed. We haven't related to 4.1, 4.0, although it's been a few years since we've had anything to do with 3.23. So my advice for people running 5.1 now is that, no, we're not going to drop support on you, but do plan transitions going forward. Right, the older version you run, compared to what is current, you start to have the knowledge of how everything works there, becoming that back part of people's brains. So it comes out to take a bit more thinking about it. So it gets to the back of people's brain, right? If you're relatively recent software, people will remember how it all works. When you're running something older, people have to think a bit harder, and it's harder to find experts in it, right? Some people don't want to go that. At Percona, we keep knowledge for a whole bunch of old versions and transitioning between them. And my advice would be, if you're on 5.1 now, plan your migration to 5.5, and then work out how you go to 5.6 from there. 5.5 now is very mature and stable as well, so it really shouldn't be a problem, but think about going forward. Percona Server 5.5 continued in the great tradition of Percona Server 5.1, and with all the added benefit of 5.5. It's currently a very stable, very reliable, and performant relational database management system, and it's trusted in many of the biggest production environments. One thing we noticed when 5.6 started to come out is we benchmarked Percona Server 5.5 against MySQL 5.6, and in a bunch of situations, Server 5.5 was outperforming MySQL 5.6. And this is due to performance improvements we've done in Percona Server. So we had this interesting side effect where actually, for us, our primary performance rival for Percona Server 5.6 was actually Percona Server 5. We had this very interesting thing where Percona Server 5.5 performed really quite well out there in the market. And so in the phrase that always gets me hated when by marketing when I say more of the same, but Percona Server 5.6 is indeed more of the same. More maintaining high performance, maintaining stability. It's focusing on features and bug fixes needed for enterprise and large-scale web deployments. So we're really talking about it as a tradition inside the company of high-performance stability, features and bug fixes that are needed by people. And we're bringing this to Percona Server 5.6 to produce our best release ever, if I do so say myself. So MySQL 5.6 is what Percona Server 5.6 is based on. My honest opinion, which you get asked for fairly often, is what is your opinion on Oracle's 5.6 release? My view on it is quite simple. I've spent a bunch of time looking at what they've published, what the actual code is that's gone into the tree, how it fits together, what's their sort of strategy going forward by looking at the code, not looking at leaflets for it, looking at the actual source code behind it. MySQL 5.6 is the best MySQL release yet. It's not overly ambitious, but it delivers a lot, right? And this is the hallmarks of a good software release, where you don't try and do everything at once, pick a few really good things, and you make a bunch of effort in it, and you continue to improve. And so we've seen from the first releases of MySQL 5.6 that they've improved in each individual point release coming, and as well post-GA as well. So it's really great to see good, high-quality software releases coming out of Oracle. I mean, there's always going to be improvements from look on. There's always going to be bugs in the first release cycle. So even when we say best release, yep, of course there's going to be teething problems. This is software we're talking about. It's not perfect. That being said, the team at Oracle is fairly responsive in fixing those, and each subsequent release has been better than the last. They've fixed a lot of problems in MySQL development processes that hung over from the Sun and MySQL AB days. So, even back when I worked at MySQL back then, we had problems in release process and the like, but we've actually managed to see a lot of those things be fixed. So we're actually getting really good releases from MySQL, which is brilliant. So I also wanted to cover what things in MySQL 5.6 were inspired by Percona Server. I've seen a number of things introduced in MySQL 5.6 that were first seen in Percona Server. So one of the first ones is crash-resistant replication. In Percona Server 5.6, we take the Oracle implementation of this. We've had it in Percona Server for a number of years. So in 5.5 and 4, we've had some similar features that you can get crash-resistant replication. So we've had some great improvements in InnoDB scalability inside MySQL, and we've done a lot of work on InnoDB scalability at Percona over the years as well, and we continue that work in 5.6. We had a great feature called InnoDB Data Dictionary Memory Usage Limits, which was first in Percona Server, and is now also in My.6. So you could limit how much memory the InnoDB Data Dictionary uses, and this can help people with a large amount of tables in their database. If you've got thousands or tens of thousands of InnoDB tables, that can just use a lot of memory, just keeping the record of that in memory. So with our changes over 5.5, and indeed the Oracle changes in MySQL 5.6, you can actually limit that so you can have more memory available for data rather than just metadata. MySQL 5.6 implements something near identical from a user's point of view. Formation schema tables to look directly at the InnoDB data dictionary. Again, we're using the Oracle implementation for Percona Server 5.6. We see no need to differ in code when there is not a very, very good reason to do so. I prefer to add features rather than just maintain something that differs slightly. So this lets you peer into InnoDB has a view of the data dictionary, and this can compare with the FRM files in MySQL and help you to solve problems that way too. Persistent index and table statistics. This was first in Percona Server as well. So on table open, when you open a table for the first time, InnoDB does index dives, which is usually 8 I/O operations to compute index statistics. And with many tables and many indexes, this can have a considerable impact on table open time. So MySQL 5.6 brings an implementation similar to what we had in Percona Server 5.5. We use the Oracle implementation 5.6. Again, why differ when we don't need to? We can innovate in other places, right? And so this allows you to not have to do those random IOs. Instead, just a small disk, single read from disk for index statistics. And this can be a really big boon to some applications. Dump and restore InnoDB buffer pool. First in Percona Server, this greatly improves database server time. So what this does is it saves, when you shut down the server or go for restart, it saves a list of the pages inside the InnoDB buffer pool. So on startup, you can read those pages exactly back into the buffer pool rather than waiting for them all to be paged in as you run new queries. So this removes what we call warm-up time, right? If you start up the server on the buffer pool, then you have to run a whole bunch of queries first that will have slower response time because they're all going to read from disk before you're actually going to get queries that are hitting cache that's in the buffer pool. So in Percona Server 5.6, we use the MySQL 5.6 implementation. In 5.5, we have our own implementation as well. That's saved a lot of people a lot of trouble over the years. So MySQL 5.6 is best MySQL yet and is strongly inspired by Percona Server. So and improving on that, of course, we had to do even better for Percona Server 5.6. So we've carefully taken our improvements in Percona Server 5.5 into 5.6. And we've also innovated further to raise the bar for 5.6 features and performance. So we haven't just done a straight port, we've added things as well to make it even better. So Percona Server 5.6, everything that is in Oracle MySQL 5.6 blended with what's in Percona Server 5.5. So we get all the goodies from MySQL 5.6, all of them are there. An important thing we do is we offer free and open source replacements for MySQL Enterprise only features. Okay, just getting a question here about 8 dives versus 1. I'm cut out for a second there. So with stored table and index statistics, when we compute the statistics, we write those to a row in a table, an InnoDB system table. And so when you open the table next time, it does one row read out of that table to retrieve the statistics rather than having to do another set of times. So this creates it. I'll just revisit that if I can. Yeah, so the persistent table and index statistics. So the 8 random IOs that would happen on table open compute some statistics we hold in memory. With persistent table and index statistics turned on, and you're closing that table and it's going out of memory, what you do then is we write those down to just a location on disk inside a hidden InnoDB table, and next time you open it up, it reads those numbers back out. So instead of doing 8 reads, it just does 1 read of that data. So that basically means that if you're on an IO-heavy workload, or you're not, IO takes time, which it always does. That means you can greatly save 8 random IOs per index on InnoDB table and open. And so that can actually greatly improve the amount of time it takes to open a table. Hopefully that answers questions. Cool. So for Percona Server 5.6, free and open source replacements for MySQL Enterprise only features. So we have the PAM Authentication plugin. So PAM is Pluggable Authentication Modules, which is the standard for Linux and Unix authentication. We also want to integrate with existing authorization infrastructure, like, for example, enforced password policies, and you can do 2-factor authentication. So this is a PAM plugin for doing authentication, completely free and open source in Percona Server. There's a thread pool implementation. So typically MySQL connections are 1 server thread per connection. The thread pool plug into the number of threads that can and set the limit to the number of threads that can run, and each thread can execute sort of more than 1 connection. This can give a decent performance boost on workloads with many, many threads. It's a workaround for a deficiency in MySQL architecture, right? So ideally what you have is a performance graph like this. As you increase the number of users, you come to a maximum amount of throughput, and then once you reach that, and the bird's singing. So we have pet birds, and the birds decided to wake up now. So ideal performance is when we max out implicit resources, and the throughput remains the same, right? That's the ideal world. In reality, it looks a bit more like this, right? You get more and more users, and you reach a peak, and then once you reach that peak, you start to decline. This tends to be the reality. And sort of how fast that drop-off is you need to improve it so that you have less of a dropout. For MySQL, typically and historically, it's been you get to a point where it's great, and then suddenly everything doesn't go so well, and it all drops off. With a thread pool, and Percona Server 5.6, you can get better to the ideal. All right, so you can actually sort of max out a bit more and just keep going for a while longer. And you can also, what does this mean in the real world? Well, here's actually a graph that someone published, right? This is a graph of connected and running threads. And so you can see that the amount of threads are actually running. If you're looking at like here, a small number is all good. But if you get towards these spikes where it's like, over 1,000 threads running, the machine does not have 1,000 CPUs. So you have a lot of threads sort of sitting around waiting, using up memory and competing for resources to actually get your work done. So fewer running threads is a good thing, right? Run for a short amount of threads are done. And so with thread pool enabled, in this graph, it enabled around the 7th. So you can see there, there's sort of like a whole bunch of more stable amounts of threads running, which means you're going to get sort of better, not necessarily better response time for those peak times, because still you have to do all that work. But it does mean you will get sort of executing from start to finish better. Like if you take the average over the whole time, it may solve all the answers. But what you care about is how much time each individual query returns. For example, if you can load 1,000 web pages in a minute, that's great. But if each web page load takes a minute and they're all delivered right at the end, that's not so good from a user experience point of view. If you do 1,000 web pages per minute and you're doing, hundreds per second, that's a much better user experience for people. Waiting for 1 second is better than waiting for a minute when you have an end user on the line. And this is one thing that thread pool can help with. It can help smooth out that load and get sort of like more consistent response time for each query. We also have user index and table statistics, and this is just simple monitoring, right? So performance schema is all well and good, and it's great that it's in MySQL 5.6, and it's great that it's so detailed to be able to get heavy data out of the database server. And if you have deep insight into the workings of the MySQL server, you can use performance schema to get into the workings of the MySQL server. But Percona Server 5.6 lets you get deep insights without any pain, right? The user index and table statistics is just simple and easy to use, right? Turn it on, query it, know what's going on. We have an extended slow query log as well, so enhanced into what's going on inside the database server, especially when combined with like Percona Toolkit and PT Query Digest. So the slow query log in Percona Server is very, very flexible and greatly improved upon what's in MySQL. It can give you an immense amount of detail of what went on for each query, and plug that into Percona Toolkit, a bunch of interesting, almost I want to say top-like data for those that use top on Unix on what queries are using sort of the most amount of database server resources. You can also plug that into Percona Playback, and you can replay your database load against other servers, effectively creating your own benchmark. So you can find out what kind of queries you're using up CPU time, and then you can take what went on to your database server and try and benchmark that against a server with different settings or different hardware and something like that. So extended slow query log is another way to get insights into what's going on. So XtraDB is the name we give to our improved InnoDB. So Percona's improved. Initially, XtraDB was very much known for performance, and now it leads in performance and features. When we came to Percona Server 5.6, our chief competition for performance was, in fact, Percona Server 5.5. We did such a good job with XtraDB 5.5 that when it came to 5.6, we really had our work cut out for us in improving against what we did in 5.5. So that was like excellent from our point of view, feeling good about our product, and also a challenge, which I'm glad to say we were able to meet. So this is performance of MySQL 14 versus Percona Server 5.6. So it's 5.6.13 Percona Server. And this is a sysbench workload. So the sysbench read-write workload, 77 gigabytes of data, 25 gig buffer pool, 32 tables, 10 million rows each, and 250 user threads. It's a graph of throughput over time. So naturally, with throughput, more is better. So here we have, in the reddish pinkish dots, we have MySQL 5.6, and the blue ones are Percona Server. So you can see there's outliers on each. but we get sort of a more consistent performance over the entire runtime of the database server with Percona Server than we do with MySQL. This is due to in Percona Server 5.6 in our performance work. We also have response time. This is what I've talked a bit about a little before. Like answering 1 million queries over a certain period of time is great, but what you also want to care about is the 95th percentile of response time. In this case, lower is better, right? The quicker is better, right? So here we have a graph of, again, MySQL 5.6.14 versus Percona Server 5.6. And of course, with the response time, lower is better. And one of the key things we see here is not only is that collection of blue dots there lower than MySQL 5.6, because Percona Server 5.6 is more consistent. There's much fewer outliers, and it's spread over a much smaller band of response time. So it means that with Percona Server 5.6, you're going to get more responses per second, as well as having the gap between making that request and getting a response shorter and more consistent, which is important for interactive applications, such as web and enterprise applications. And this leads onto some great features we have in XtraDB and Percona Server 5.6 to do with Percona XtraBackup. So basically one of the big things we've focused on recently is also backup solutions. Because after all, data not backed up is data not cared about, right? Data not backed up is data that isn't loved and will go away and you won't get it back. That being said, we have some great disaster recovery services when you don't have backed up data, and by all, you're welcome to come and use our disaster recovery services and try and get some data out when you don't have a backup and everything goes pear-shaped. I encourage you to do that, but on the other hand, that costs a whole lot of money and time to do that. You probably want to back up your data anyway, and luckily we have software to do that. So in Percona Server 5.6 and XtraBackup 2.1, we have some great features that work together to get better backup. Percona XtraBackup is free and open source backup. So it's not, with MySQL Enterprise, you get access to MySQL Enterprise Backup, which is commercial software, which is also proprietary software. With Percona XtraBackup, it's open source software. So you get the source code to what's going on there. You can see what's going. You get support from us, or you can always use it indefinitely for the rest of time and get whoever you want to support. We encourage you to get support from us. Why? We know the product. We know what we're doing in here, and we believe we provide the best support and services around it. So you get the most out of Percona Server and XtraBackup when used together. And XtraBackup is an online backup tool for MySQL as well. So it will work against MySQL and other variants as well as Percona Server. One of the big things we have in 5.6 with the latest Percona XtraBackup is improved incremental backup. So let's have a look at how XtraBackup currently performs an incremental backup. It's what we refer to as a slow incremental backup. What it does is it scans every page inside the InnoDB table space to see whether it's changed. So on your initial first full backup, right, you're backing up everything in the database. When you're doing an incremental backup, you just need to copy the bits that have changed. So to discover the bits that have changed, backup would do is look at each page inside the table space and go, has this changed, yes or no? Has this changed, yes or no? And so if you have 100 gigabytes of InnoDB table space, that's 100 gigabytes of read I/O. And our research showed that the time to backup is dependent on amount of data changed. Scan incremental, the worst case was 70% of full backup time. The best case is a majority of data changed, then just 45 to 60% of full backup time. So this means that for doing a full scan incremental, when you have to do this algorithm, which is look at each individual page, you're looking at between 45 to 70% of the amount it takes to do a full backup. And at that amount of time, it's like sometimes it's worth it to get a smaller backup file at the end. But on the other hand, 70% can be pretty close to 100%. So you may just take full backups. So how can we improve this? So we do better incremental backup with Percona Server 5.6 with Percona XtraBackup 2.1 by making changes to the database server. So we have a change page tracking feature in Percona Server 5.6. And this lets us eliminate pages from the scan of InnoDB data files. We also have log archiving, which is an Oracle relational database style incremental backup. So those who are used to Oracle's incremental backups will be familiar in how log archiving works. And it's something very similar that we're doing. There's actually two ways to improve incremental backup. The idea is that we do less I/O, and that means faster backups. So if I change change page tracking feature for doing incremental backups in Percona Server 5.6, if we change 1% of data on the server, so instead of taking 70% of full backup time, so if a full backup took 100 minutes, instead of an incremental backup, you only change 1% of data, instead of taking 70 minutes, it would now take to 10 to 20 minutes, which is a much bigger improvement. And the worst case for this now is when with the majority of data change, it's now just 40 to 50% of full backup time. So we're actually saving a lot of time when it comes to performing backups. And this is using change page tracking in Percona Server 5.6. We also have log archiving, which is very low impact, just archives logs off. And that's the trade-off there is it takes longer time to prepare the backups, because you have to replay all of the logs. So we tried to measure the performance impact of using change page to improve incremental backups. So we tried to measure the performance impact. We tried really, really hard, and we can't actually measure the impact. It's effectively zero. Any impact of change page tracking to improved incremental backups is well within the noise level of any benchmark we can come up to, which is absolutely brilliant, because it means you get improved incremental backups essentially for free. Not only for free in performance or free in impact on server performance, you get it essentially for free because it's free and open source software, right? Completely open source and get no performance impact. So it's almost the feature in a way for when you're implementing it. It's like this just gives win-win-win to everyone, which is wonderful. So Percona Server 5.6 is being delivered with world-class software engineering practices as well. We have lots of advanced continuous integration, testing, and packaging infrastructure helping us to ensure software. So we're really, really pleased with the quality of Percona Server 5.6. This builds on the great quality of MySQL 5.6 as well, and we've done extensive testing of our own and extensive work making sure that whenever we push out a release, it is the best release we've ever done. And I can say without a doubt, Percona Server 5.6 is the best release we've ever done. In summary, all of this, you get proven stability and performance. We build on our work and expertise developed through work in 5.1 and 5.5, so we're very much market leaders in performance, reliability, and manageability. It's trusted by some of the largest companies on the internet. And why do they use it? Well, they use it because they get bug fixes faster and a rapid response to customer requests, right? So we can get bug fixes out to people's hands quickly. When customers have a problem, if it ends up being a server problem, we can get it fixed out to them very soon. We have extensive QA infrastructure ensuring quality release for release, timely releases, right? Our guarantee is that within any new minor version released by Oracle, we'll get a release out within 30 days. And we actually have a track record here to prove it. So this is for Percona Server 5.5 from way back our first beta release out to the latest release we did very recently. Steady over the life of the product. For the release cycle, we can get releases out on time that are up to date. So if something is fixed in the Oracle release, you get it in Percona Server well within a reasonable time frame. And we've stuck to that and can do it time and time again. And the same story you'll see for Percona Server 5.6. Everything about Percona Server 5.6 is software. There is no proprietary, commercial, binary-only add-ons designed for vendor lock-in. What you have to pay for in MySQL Enterprise, you can get with Percona Server for nothing. We're all about drop-in compatibility and being free and open source software. There is no Percona Server Enterprise confusion or proprietary offering or anything like that. We're not trying to get weird Percona Server Enterprise offer. Our offer is that it's free and open source software, and what we have to sell you, of course, is top-notch support and services around that. And that's our offering, is to support you in running it, in scaling your MySQL environment, and doing a really good job with that, and helping with your app. That's our offer. There is no proprietary software. There is no confusion. It's all free and open source software. We recognize backups are important, right? So this is combined with Percona Server with XtraBackup. backups are really, really important. They're important for disaster recovery. They're important to be able to seed new slaves when you're sailing out. And they're very, very important for that wonderful peace of mind. So free and open source online backup, right? Again, free and open source software, online backup. And we've enhanced the server to enhance backups. So because we do both Percona Server and XtraBackup, we can work together to make the best backup possible. And this is what we have in Percona Server 5.6. Backup that's really high performance. Drop-in compatible. This is no vendor lock-in. It's easy to migrate to Percona Server, and it's easy to migrate away from, right? Being drop-in compatible is very important. We do not vary for the sake of varying. We 100% drop-in compatibility. We will make bug fixes. We will make performance improvements. We will not change behavior, and that's important. So we're trusted. We're trusted and used by the largest companies on the internet. We're used by a lot of people because bug fixes first, and Percona Server first, about 40 at last count, a bit over that now. Insightful and easy to use diagnostics, not 37 configuration to get diagnostics out of the server. We want to have things there that are easy for people to come over, and find out what's going on. We have a large consulting and remote DBA organization that isn't afraid to voice their opinion to development. So we're very customer-focused development. So all of these features come very heavily customer influenced and consultant influenced. So, Percona Server 5.6, how do you get there? Migrating can depend on individual circumstances. For the vast majority of cases, it's just an in-place upgrade. We have documentation on the differences between Percona Server 5.6 and 5.5, and as well as the normal documentation on the differences between MySQL and 5.6. For the most part, install it, restart the server, and you'll be fine. I say this, you should always plan migrations and not just, upgrade in production in the middle of a peak time just to see what happens. It's possibly a bad idea. And there's not a huge amount of compatibility notes for many people. So it's not be a problem. The additional overhead of going from MySQL 5.5 to Percona Server 5.6 is also fairly small. As I said, drop-in compatible. It's real simple to switch across. We try and document what we can. We have consultants with a whole bunch of knowledge about what can go right and wrong, migrations to 5.6, and can help people plan out to make sure that there's ways forward, there's ways to roll back if anything unexpected happens, and that kind of thing. So you can migrate across easily with confidence and know that you can migrate to Percona Server 5.6 as well as it's drop-in compatible. If you ever wanted to, it's great done with the solutions as well. And this also means you can also migrate to Percona XtraDB cluster. So we're going to have Percona XtraDB cluster 5.6 within months is the plan. It's easy to migrate from Percona Server to PXC. And XtraDB cluster is currently the most drop-in high availability solution available. It suits the majority of workloads fairly well. And it can be used to upgrade from MySQL asynchronous replication to a more synchronous replication solution. And of course, again, it is completely free and open source software. So going from MySQL or Percona Server to Percona XtraDB cluster can also be a win for high environments as well. So easy to migrate, easy to use. An XtraDB cluster is definitely sort of the most drop-in and most workload compatible. You generally do not require application changes to have it work well, which is a great thing. So with that, I will say that in MySQL Performance blog in the next few days, I'll post a follow-up blog post detailing what is sort of more details and a bunch of Percona Server 5 to 6 things. And with that, let's go for some Q&A if we have any questions, as well as I shall now speak for a Percona Live London conference. If you've never been to London, I heartily recommend it. Lovely city, one of my favorites. Percona Live events are great little conferences. I say little, they're not little at all, they're actually quite large, where experts in the field of using MySQL, developing MySQL, administering it, come together and talk about their experiences. present on things found, and it's a great learn no matter what. I've been in the MySQL world very deeply for, 10 years now. I'll just get scared that. Very much know what's going on inside the source code level, and at everyone I always learn something new, and everyone I speak to does, which is great. So if you haven't gone to one, look at London. Also think about April, California again. Definitely go to it as well. And yes, do we have any questions?
Okay, one of the questions is if you could just recap the PXC, Percona XtraCluster part. You were breaking up just a little bit. Would you mind recapping that?
Sure, not a problem. Percona XtraDB cluster, we plan to have the XtraDB cluster 5.6 release within a couple of months, very shortly. Percona XtraDB cluster is based on Galera application, and it's currently the most drop-in high availability solution available. So it's a synchronous form of replication between multiple nodes, and it's fairly, I say fairly drop-in. You can always write applications that will do horrific things to high availability environments, right? Majority now of applications that are out there that are running on MySQL, let's say asynchronous replication. The majority of these will fit into XtraDB cluster without a problem, without application modification, which is really what you want when you're wanting to go to a high availability solution. Other solutions may involve rewriting parts of the application, rewriting a bunch of queries, or you can't really do that. XtraDB cluster is a fairly drop-in compatible kind of thing, which really suits a lot of workloads. So you can write to multiple nodes as well, which is quite novel. So unlike with normal MySQL replication where you have one master and a whole bunch of read slaves, with XtraDB cluster you can write to many nodes as well. And there's naturally things how you deal with network latency and to make that work. But for the vast majority of apps, it's just drop it in and play. So upgrading or migrating from Percona server to XtraDB cluster is also low effort, and this builds again on all the great features of Percona server 5.6 and the latest XtraBackup to make a better product. So think about XtraDB cluster if you need sort of an extra amount of high availability.
Great, thank you for clarifying that.
We also have a question here on release date. Yeah, we don't have a solid release date, of course. We wanted to get Percona server 5.6 out and as high quality and highest as possible first, but it shouldn't be too long. We're all about releasing quality software.
Okay, Stuart, the next question is, how does playback work with replication? For example, testing a target server which is replicating from production, seeing if the test server is fast enough but needing most up-to-date data.
Okay, so Percona playback and replication environments. So it depends what you're wanting to test. If you're wanting to test, will this new slave, hardware or software configure with the master, there's really only one way to test that, and that is make it a slave and see what happens. Percona playback is more designed to simulate master workload or a high read workload. There is actually someone submitted some patches to me just the other day, which I'm going to merge in for a future release to try and do sort of queries again with playback. But your usual workload with playback will be to record a read-write data set and replay that against another server. So it may be not so much testing, will my slaves keep up or will my slaves hold together? It's more, you can think of it as a, how do I test if this new configuration I'm thinking for a master will perform any better? So it will be, will adding CPU cores actually help me at all? Will adding buffer pool help me at all? Will upgrading to a different server version help me at all? And that's kind of, or tweaking this configuration parameter. That's one of the primary use cases of playback, is to capture that read-write workload. If you're just looking for, keep up, then make it a slave and see what happens. Don't put it in the slave read-only pool, but see if it keeps up. If you're wanting to test sort of read-only workload, so you're wanting to test, hey, will this changes improve sort of my read-only thing as a slave? You can in fact have a slave that's a real slave off the mast and record a playback load from one of your slaves. It's all the read-only queries, and play that against your testing blade. So, if you capture a read-only workload, it's going to replay a read-only workload. So you just, depend what you capture and what you replay against, and how you set that up in your replication infrastructure could be how exactly you want to test that. And there'll be some improvements coming in a future release beyond 0.7 that may help in capturing that as well, or converting a read-write workload into a read-only workload. So hopefully that's a little helpful on hints.
Okay, the next question. When MySQL 5.6 was first generally available, this person was told that multi-threaded replication wasn't ready for production use yet. Is multi-threaded replication production ready in Percona servers 5.6 general available version?
Yep. Different every person you ask, right? There is the questions of, is it mostly bug-free? There are the questions of, is it useful enough? And so the multi-threaded replication solution in 5.6 is currently partitions on database, right? So you have multiple database schemas, MySQL instance. So to say, a typical example could be you have 10 different apps on your database server, and they each have their own database, right? They're each in their own schema. And they're all independent of each other, right? So you're essentially sort of doing multi-tenancy, 10 different apps, one MySQL database server. If that's where you partition things, then the parallel replication will help, because it partitions the workload up per database. And as long as these are independent things, you're all fine. In that environment, then the feature is there and does what you need it to do. If your replication job is everything is in a single database and your bottleneck is on a single table, then no, it won't work for you. For database. Future release may work for you, but 5.6 will not currently improve that at all. So if you talk about, is it production ready, it sort of depends. Well, it depends on your environment. So if you have a multitude of databases there and you can parallelize on database, then yeah, it could be. And then you're just talking about, is it of suitable enough quality? We haven't seen a huge number of problems come in on that yet, so it's probably in a good position. And as with anything, production ready means, is it production ready for you? I've seen numerous examples of pieces of software that are very production ready for some people. They've been running with 5 nines uptime for a number of years, and yet other people options it falls apart horrifically at. So generally speaking, the replication code in 5.6 seems to be fairly solid. There's a few gotchas around the place and stuff that's being polished up, so it's not perfect. No software is perfect, but as rough edges go, it's relatively minor, on the scale of things. So replication stuff, if what it gives you now, which is database level parallelism, if that works for you, odds are it's actually going to give you a benefit now. And barring any surprises, which I wouldn't really expect there to be, it'll be pretty good. So my guess is, for the vast majority of cases, yep, use. For some cases, it won't be ready. That's the way it goes. But for a majority, it's definitely worth looking into.
Okay. So the next question is, what features does Oracle's MySQL Enterprise Edition have that Percona Server 5.6 does not?
What does MySQL Enterprise have that Percona Server 5.6 doesn't? I think there's a specific type of audit plugin that we don't have. The big ones that get bandied around are like Enterprise Backup and PAM plugin. We have both of those that are free and open source software. The other separate bit of software you get with MySQL Enterprise is the Enterprise Monitor. We don't currently have anything like that. Generally, it only saw sort of a small amount of use. And this is an own separate monitoring app just for a service, so it doesn't integrate with your other monitoring stuff for monitoring your network or application performance or anything. So think about something like Nagios, but only for MySQL. There is some insight you can get with that can be useful. We prefer to do things a bit differently and have things like the table and index statistics to get some of the similar data out. You can actually use the performance schema a lot to get some of the same data out and do it that way. So there's a few things there. The big ones being MySQL Enterprise Monitor, which is, does not have a direct replacement in Percona Server. The other one is some audit plugin that would actually not be a whole bunch of code to implement. So if that's what you really need, contact us. We'll work and make it happen. It's not it. But for the big ticket items are, of course, pluggable authentication stuff. We have PAM plugin and backup. And our backup is free and open source in XtraBackup.
Okay, the next question. We have several mission-critical databases running on MySQL 5.1.x. Would you recommend moving these to Percona Server 5.6 now, or should we do an intermediate upgrade to Percona Server 5.5?
Yeah, so the decision whether you go straight from 5.1 to 5.6 or via 5.5 is an interesting one. And this is something I would largely defer to some of our consultants with real strong expertise in doing that in production. And the reason I defer that is we can sit here and talk theory all we like. It's the horror stories from actually doing it in production. It's the ones that either make you say go ahead or not. That being said, it is generally the supported practice to go from 5.1 to 5.5, 5.6, so not skipping major versions. I know some people will in fact skip major versions because they know this is okay, and for the most part, I think that would all be fine. The thing is, you have to think about is when you're doing replication, that's all going to be okay, which it mostly should be if you do it correctly and follow the letter of the book. You can also do a very short upgrade to 5.5. Right? There's no reason why you can't just upgrade to 5.5 and then an hour later upgrade to 5.6. There is nothing stopping that. And so depending on your requirements there can be whether you do it or not. That being said, going to Percona Server 5.5 will probably give you a whole bunch of benefits from MySQL 5.1 anyway. So that can always be a good thing to do. And then going to 5.6 really short after is not a bigger leap as necessarily you'd think. The gaps between 5.1 and 5.5 and 5.6 have been much smaller and less invasive in some ways than some of the other versions. So from going from 5.0 to 5.1 or 4.1 to 5.0 with much bigger jumps than going to 5.5 or 5.6. And so the devil in these things is in the details, and that's where I refer to someone to have a a closer look and explain the niggly bits that could possibly cause problems, or all be fine. But on the whole, either strategy is valid, and the strategy of going to 5.5 for a few hours or a day is also perfectly valid. And it's depending how many variables you want to control at once. But probably is possible in a bunch of situations. Generally, it's not the recommended thing to jump a major release, but sometimes it is feasible and possible. So hopefully that helps a little. Sorry for not having a straight yes or no answer.
Okay. So the next question is, how do you upgrade from Percona Server 5.5 to 5.6 in Red Hat-based distros? Is there any guide online that you know of?
How do you upgrade from 5.5 to 5.6 on Red Hat-based distros? So if you're running from our RPM packages from our Yum repository, you can actually just install the Percona Server 5.6 package, and everything should just. So in that case, if you're using the Percona Server Yum repo or RPM packages for that matter, you invoke Yum or RPM to say, hey, install 5.6. It will say this means you're going to remove 5.5, and you'll go, okay, shut down, restart the server, and it comes up being 5.6. So that's the simple way to do that. There should be documentation on upgrading in our Percona Server 5.6 documentation. So it will mention about installing 5.6, which if you do that when 5.5 is already installed, it will say, hey, do you want to remove 5.5 and install 5.6? And there's also documentation on what to watch out for, which are general 5.6 things. So it shouldn't be too much of a hassle going from 5.5 to 5.6 to basically install the new packages, and you make sure if you have replication slaves to upgrade everything in the right order and stuff like that. But yeah, it should be really easy, just like upgrading any other package.
What are the plans for Percona Server 5.6 on Amazon RDS? Or does it work on RDS?
What are the plans for Percona Server 5.6 and RDS? So Amazon's RDS is a database as a service offering that is a rather opaque sort of MySQL instance. Amazon, their own custom MySQL build in there, and so really it's up to Amazon what they would offer in there. So they're not running straight Oracle MySQL. As far as I can tell, they're not running straight Percona server at least. But from the user side, it's drop in MySQL. If you're wanting straight Percona server on Amazon RDS, the best thing to do is bug Amazon for it. Say, hey Amazon, I want the Percona server features in RDS. Hey Amazon, I want the Percona server features in RDS, and poke them heavily. That would be one way to do it. You can also run Percona server in EC2, so launch up a machine and run Percona server. That's really quite simple to do. Any of the EC2 instances and installing stuff there will work just fine. We do it ourselves fairly often, test new versions and try something against different server versions alike. So it's a simple thing to do. But as for RDS itself, it all depends on the service. I know other cloud vendors that do database as a service that run Percona server proper. So I'll take the example of HP. So HP Cloud, their database as a service offering is Percona server. When you ask for a database instance that's on HP Cloud, you get Percona server, and it is Percona server. The database as a service and a cloud offering, have a look at that one. There's other ones. Rackspace is also working on database as a service in there, and they may also offer Percona server. And this also is for other OpenStack-based cloud providers. Also look into that. So if they're using the OpenStack database as a service, like Trove, Percona server is a real thing that people run often. And that's only set to expand, which is great. So yeah, RDS proper may or may not ever offer a Percona server, but there's other database as a service providers that will.
Okay, so we have time for just a couple more questions. The first one is related to Percona server, and then there's quite a few on PXC. And at that point, I'd also like to introduce our Director of Product Management, Matt Griffin, who's on the phone to help address some of those questions about when it's going to be released, alphas and betas and that kind of thing. So with that said, let me just talk about the last question that we have on Percona Server 5.6. With the current 5.6 general availability version, can we go live in the production environment, or do you see any issues?
Cool. Can you go live in a production environment is always an app-specific question and a situation-specific question, right? It may be that you're using something really, really odd that just happened to change and that, will definitely explode when you do any minor or major release. That is not the normal case, right? And I would say for the majority of use cases and the majority of situations, going live with 5.6 is absolutely fine, right? It's positively a good idea. There are some situations where it's not a good idea, and I will always recommend trialing it on a slave first, trialing it in test, and just upgrading production straight away. I'll always say test it out first. There can always be hidden surprises. There can be weird interactions that only show up when you have one specific kernel version and one specific RAID control version, one specific set of software doing specific calls, and this kind of stuff happens more often than we'd like, and it's always good to test. Being said, I do not see any showstopper problems with going into production with 5.6 and planning to do that with adequate testing beforehand. I don't see any problems. Yep, 5.6 definitely ready. I am not joking when I say I think it's the best release yet.
Okay, thank you. So Matt and Stuart, there are a couple of questions. I'm going to group them together and let you guys discuss it. The first is, I think you touched on it, the availability. What's the timeline for Percona cluster? And is it waiting? This might be more for you, Stuart. Are we really waiting on Galera 3.0 release version? And what are the plans in terms of alpha and beta releases of PXC?
Yeah, I'll just jump in on a few of those. Now that Percona Server 5.6 is released, the next piece of software to be updated is the Percona XtraDB cluster 5.6 version. There are some upstream dependencies, so it's not going to be immediately, and we will have a period of alphas and betas So my advice there is watch the MySQL Performance blog, and we will announce those when they're available. You can also watch the Launchpad project if you'd like. So we'll have a process of alphas and betas leading up to the release of Percona XtraDB cluster.
Okay.
Did you want to say anything on Galera 3.0 there, or what were you going to say?
Yeah, I think that from what I understand, I think there is a dependency on, that's one of the dependencies that's part of the plans for Percona XtraDB cluster 5.6.
Okay. Any other
From my
comments?
point of view, and from looking on some of the specifics on PXE process development, yeah, it's all about making sure we deliver the highest quality product. That's pretty much what it's all waiting on, to make sure we get the right combination of stability.
Okay, fantastic. Well, this brings us to the top of the hour. I would like to thank everybody. If we did not get to your question, and there are a few, Stuart will be getting this list of questions, and we'll be doing a pretty in-depth follow-up blog post on Percona's MySQL Performance blog. So please take a look at that in the next few days, and you'll probably see the answer to your post there. So thank you very much, Stuart and Matt, and everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Have a wonderful day, evening, morning, depending on where you are, and we hope to see you next week. We'll be having another webinar, and this one is on 5.6 replication next Wednesday. Thank you again, everybody. Have a wonderful day.